This is the iPhone X. It came out in 2017 and it completely changed what an iPhone looked like. I wanted to revisit it 8 years later to see how it feels because a lot of what we use now started here. It removed the home button, introduced Face ID, and made swipe navigation the new normal. People reacted exactly how you'd expect. Some people loved it instantly. Some people treated it an absolute outrage like, Apple just made unlocking your phone harder and I'm supposed to clap? Funny thing is, people adjusted. They always do. But about the feel of this phone, pick one up now and it still feels premium. Stainless steel sides, glass front and back, that heavy, solid build quality that Apple nailed even back then. The bezels do look chunky and the notch feels massive compared to something like the iPhone 16e, even though that's kind of a joke on its own, but it still carries itself like a high-end phone. It was built to feel special and most of the time, it did. The iPhone X was controversial. $1,000 for a phone was unheard of back then. Headlines everywhere said Apple was out of touch. But the irony, within months, Samsung and Google were asking the same prices. And then there was the notch. Memes everywhere. Samsung even ran ads trolling Apple, calling it a phone with a haircut. But over time, that notch turned into a design signature, instantly recognizable from across the room. Love it or hate it, you always knew it was an iPhone. Back then, Samsung's Galaxy S8 looked slick with its infinity display, headphone jack, and no notch. People said the S8 looked more futuristic, gorgeous, and way ahead of its time. The X, on the other hand, its DNA was to be present in the next 10 years of iPhones. Apple basically said, this is our design language for the next decade. And they weren't kidding. Pretty much every iPhone that followed looked like a variation of this. The notch, the swipe-up navigation, Face ID, that was the blueprint, even if everyone roasted the notch at first. The X landed with the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, the safe upgrades for people who wanted comfort. The X was different, the bold, experimental model. Call it the iPhone 9 if you want, but it was more of a bold leap than an evolution. With the new features, it was giving major Darth Vader energy. It wasn't just a new look, it forced developers and users to relearn how a phone should behave. And that's why it became the template for the next decade of iPhones. The screen is a 5.8-inch OLED, Super Retina. In 2017, it looked incredible. In 2025, it still looked good. Deep blacks, punchy colors, but it's only 60Hz. Once you use 120Hz screens, going back feels a bit sluggish. Dated. It's not bad, but it's not keeping anymore. You know, Apple doesn't always invent new features first, but when they commit, they force the industry to follow. Samsung had OLED screens for years, but Apple switched to OLED with the X instantly made it the standard. Same with gesture navigation. Google quietly copied it a year later. Now try finding a flagship phone with a home button. You won't. Yes, gestures weren't a new idea. I mean, we had phones from 2009 like Palm Pre, but when Apple did it, it became a standard for everyone else to follow or copy. And Face ID? When it first came out, Face ID was mocked for being slower than Touch ID. And yeah, it was. But Apple clearly had bigger plans for it. It wasn't just about unlocking the phone, it powered things like Animoji, not sure who actually used that, secure payments, even attention awareness. Basically the groundwork for all the privacy features iPhones now brag about. If you wanna believe all that. Tragically, the screen on my unit has been replaced and it's not the same kind of panel you'd get from Apple, which is why there's dust sitting under the glass. And yeah, that means Face ID has its problems. Performance is kind of the same story. The A11 Bionic chip was an absolute monster back in its day. In 2025, it still handles basic apps and light use fine. It will run social media, browsing, maybe some light gaming just fine. But it's definitely not keeping up with the latest heavy workloads. And iOS support is basically done. Apple kept it longer than many phones get supported, but newer iOS features don't come to it. The Apple A11 Bionic on a 10nm process inside the X was a beast in 2017. But if we place it in 2025's lineup, the A11 is about equivalent to a Snapdragon 7 series mid-range chip, like the Snapdragon 778G or 782G in CPU, but weaker in efficiency, modem, and sustained performance. The chips inside modern iPhones are on another level. The A18, built on a 3nm process, is roughly about 3 times as fast as the A11 on single-threaded tasks, and the A19 would push that even further. That 3nm jump isn't just raw speed, it also means better efficiency and less heat. So those gains show up in heavy multitasking, video edits, etc. On the X, I do feel the heat, like a lot. Now, the cameras. The iPhone X came with a dual 12-megapixel setup, including a telephoto. Looking back at the photos now, you can see the age immediately. There's a lot of heavy sharpening baked in, and the way it handles highlights and shadows feels rough. The dynamic range just isn't there. If you compare it closely, the results are almost identical to the iPhone 8 series, which makes sense. It was launched right alongside them. Even though the design makes you think it might shoot like the XS that came later, the images and video tells a different story. In good light, the pictures still look fine, sharp enough with colors that again look fine. But the second you stack it against what we have in 2025, it obviously falls apart. Low light is noisy, video stabilization feels dated, and the front camera shares the same weaknesses. There are no serious computational tricks here, no night mode, no cinematic video. And that's alright for an 8-year-old phone. Most phones don't even survive that long. The weak spot is the battery. If you still have an original iPhone X, the battery is almost certainly degraded. Back then it was decent, around 5 hours of screen on time. Today you'd be lucky to get through a half a day. A battery replacement isn't optional, it's necessary. Charging was never fast either, roughly an hour and a half when it was new. But then there are the haptics. Even now they feel precise, sharp, very Apple. Every tap, every buzz still lands with intention. The speakers don't hold up in the same way. They are serviceable, but compared to what's normal in 2025, they sound thin. Now, what keeps surprising me though is how familiar it still feels. The gestures we use on every iPhone today, swiping up to go home, sliding along the bottom bar to multitask, all that started here. And that makes the X feel both dated and current at the same time. So how does it hold up in 2025? Better than you would expect. The stainless steel frame still feels premium. The OLED screen is small now, but crisp and vibrant. The cameras clearly show their age, and the battery drags the experience down, but if you replace it, the phone can still cover the basics. Light use, simple tasks, it can handle them without a problem. The problem is that even budget phones today outplace it in meaningful ways, so recommending it isn't realistic. But that isn't the point. The iPhone X is the blueprint. So much of the iPhone we know now, gestures, design, Face ID, edge-to-edge OLED, was born here. It is not the phone to buy in 2025, it is, however, a classic. Let me close with this. It wasn't just the iPhone 10, it was the iPhone times 10. Now, if you want to know everything good and bad about iPhones and why people keep buying them, that video is right here. My name is Mubashir Hamid and you have been watching Honestic. If you would like to see me on your homepage again, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video.